Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Welcome, everybody, to another week of Barry and Del. So today, the subject today is top of mind for me. Barry thinks he's going to not get away with nothing this week, but I'm going to provoke him into some memories. But today,
invite.
We're going to talk about feeling violated, and specifically in the work that I do, that's a subject that comes up a lot. You know, obviously in narcissistic relationships, there's violations of boundaries, and you know, there can be a lot of things that are going on that can have you, you know, sort of people lying to you and gaslighting you and having affairs and things like that can have you feeling incredibly violated. But today I'm going to talk about when it's a complete stranger and you have been violated. And the reason it's up for me right now is a couple of weeks ago I got hacked, and somebody got into my Facebook account, and they stole money because it was connected to my PayPal account. But the worst thing they did was they actually took my identity on social media off. So I went from having thousands of followers to having none. And it really impacts my work. A lot of my clients find me on Facebook and reach out to me on that way. But what I know how it happened. And just like in these narcissistic relationships, it's usually people who are sort of like caring or considerate or conscientious that usually are the ones that get taken advantage of. And I'm sharing how it happened just in case somebody's listening, and maybe we should have even called the show Hacked. But I just want people to be aware that there's so many scams out there. But how it happened for me was I was getting a message on Facebook from Meta Platform Inc., which, as we know, Meta is the behind Instagram and Facebook. And they said that I was in violation, that I'd used a photograph without permission. And when I was putting my weekly blogs out, I'd always put a lovely photograph with my blogs. And I thought, gosh, what if I have used a photo, you know, that the photographer has decided he doesn't want it out there anymore. He wants to be paid for it. So I innocently clicked on the link. I ignored it at first. My instincts are saying, not sure about this, because I usually use photographs with permission. I thought, well, maybe somebody's changed their mind. I should at least check it out. But as I said, it's the conscientious among us that often are the ones that get taken. So they got in, and but it's what that brings up, all the feelings that brings up with the violation of powerlessness, suspicion, fear of being hacked again, fear of clicking any link again, anger, and grief of losing all my clients, of feeling like, not losing my clients, my following rather, and just all these feelings that come up. So Barry, did any of that inspire anything in you to share?
Well, the thing is, I'm looking back at my own dating history, and there isn't anything that comes to mind immediately in terms of my relationships where that happened. However, I definitely have two instances that come to mind very easily about being violated by strangers. One of which is where my house got broken into. Someone made off with my camera gear and my computer at the time. And the feeling, it was like three things at once. One was my space was invaded. So suddenly it was dirty. It was like it was messed up. And there was such a sense of not having my own space to myself, which felt very unprotected, which I know happens in relationship too. So I know there's a lot of parallels there. Mm-hmm. Second piece was that I'd have to replace all this stuff, you know, that was stolen. The third piece that was more important was what was on the computer and on the camera that was stuff I didn't have backup of. And I lost a lot of things. And having had that experience of loss and not knowing how, if or what I could do to get it back, which I couldn't, but to move on from that point, it's almost like having to grieve the loss because I couldn't do anything about it. It's like having to move on. I
Mm.
had a different experience um, many years prior when I had a car stolen. And the thing is, and this is the weird part, well, not weird, but different though, is that, when you get a car stolen, get something stolen, tends to be you don't get it back. I got the car back to a week later because the police knew the people who steal the cars in where I used to live back in England.
Hmm.
When I got the car back, I couldn't keep it anymore.
Mm.
I actually had to sell it because I just didn't feel like it was mine anymore. It had been violated. I'd been, um, it was like my connection to the car had been severed in a
Mm.
way. It felt really weird. And
Yeah.
so the sense of feeling violated has a lot of flavors to it. Like when you mentioned what you were talking about with that thing, it's almost like you feel like you can't trust again.
Yeah.
And I've experienced myself with different things. And again, looking at relationships, I don't recall anything where, I mean, I know in my relationships, no, I never had anybody cheating, we never had anybody, stepping out. No, but none of that was going on where there's a sense of being trust was broken in my partnerships, except in the relationship itself. So the violation, same as for you in this context, was from a stranger from outside.
Yeah.
But the feeling that comes up and the distress that can come up is very real.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really it is and it's again it can seem so trivial, but it is, and it's not like, oh, I don't trust again, and it's just simply like, even being introduced to somebody that apparently somebody else had used. I only got referrals from friends, because as soon as I sort of put it out there on social media, hey, I've been hacked, I got like a million people saying I can help you, and you're like, oh, I can sense they're all there's potential hackers out there. So
Right.
I did get a recommendation from somebody, and they haven't been able to help me so far, but we haven't given up hope. We're going to try one more time in January. um, but the that feeling, like I said, some of those emotions that come up, I was shocked at how, I started to judge myself. I felt depressed. I felt like, is this a sign from the universe? Am I supposed to do something else now? I was about to start advertising a 6-week program starting in end of January, and that's usually where I film my programs, is on social media. And so you start reading into it, like, what's the message here? Am I supposed to learn something from this? What is this? And and again, as I say, especially when you are, am I supposed to be not so conscientious? Am I supposed to just not care so much if I am violating a rule or not? So it's interesting, those emotions. But when you were talking, it did actually make me think about, because you were mentioning relationships, and I remember being in a relationship with somebody who was, I didn't know it at the time, but who was a serial cheater. And once I found out, that feeling of being violated was so
Yeah.
huge, so
Right.
huge. Because again, it's having something done to you without your knowledge. Now, if they're sleeping with you while they're sleeping with other people, if everybody's open about it, it's like, fine, okay, there's an open relationship. But
Yep.
when you're being intimate with somebody, and they have this whole secret life unbeknownst to you, that is the feeling that I was left with more than anything, was this unbelievable feeling of having been violated on a sexual level, because I would
True.
never have agreed openly to having an open relationship. But I would have liked
Right.
the choice. I would have liked somebody to say, oh, by the way, I'm doing this. Do you want to do this too? I would have said no, thank you, but at least I would have known what was going on, known what
Right.
the rules of the relationship were. So again, it's that something being done to you without your knowledge, and that's beyond your control. So that's
One of
just,
the things, yeah, one of the things I want to add to this too, and I'm going from my own experience here at this point, is there's almost this part of us that feels like if only we'd known, or if somehow it's like, but I should have known better. That sort of self
oh yeah.
violate is that self destructive talking, because it's like when my house got broken into, it's like I look back and go, I could have fixed that. I could have stopped that if I'd done this, this, and this, and this. It would have never happened, sort of thing. Like it's the 2020 hindsight piece.
Exactly.
And so what happens is when the violation happens, whether it is in relationship or it's in your life in general, there's a part of us that thinks that we could somehow go back in time and fix things or change things, and it's not. It's done. It's over. It's complete.
Hmm.
So ultimately, one of the best things I recommend first of all, is be gentle with yourself, because when you are violated, it can feel very wounding. You've been hurt on a level, and that feeling of just being um, helpless to a degree, or certainly violated. The first step, frankly, is you can't fix it immediately. So that's the one thing to be aware of, is that you may not be able to fix what happened. It's already done. What you can do is how you deal with yourself. And so having some gentleness with yourself, and yes, of course, we talk about forgiveness in our work and about dealing with things like resentment and other things too. There are things we can do along the way.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something that it, the temptation to start beating ourselves up can
Yeah.
be very overwhelming. So don't do that.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's really something that especially when you say to somebody, I've been hacked, and people go, how? And then you say how, and you go, oh, you didn't. Oh, you did
Right.
click on
Yeah.
it, did you? And then the shame comes up, and you're like, and again, that's sort of beating yourself up. Like, why did I ignore that message for? Because I kept getting them repeatedly, and I kept ignoring them because I kept thinking, no, I've always had permission to use photographs. And then I just started to override that instinct and just say, because they also kept ramping it up. I was getting these messages like every day, twice a day.
Yeah.
And I feel the pressure of, oh my God, it's like tomorrow I'm not going to have a Facebook account or an Instagram. So I better check. Um,
They convinced you, basically.
Pardon?
They
The
convinced you, basically.
Well, exactly, and so just, yeah, it felt very real. But again, the embarrassment when you have to say, "Yep, yep, I fell for it. I was one of those." But there are so many out there that you really. I mean, there's the obvious ones like, I'm stuck in South Africa and I lost my passport and I have no money. Would you buy me a ticket home? I mean, those are really obvious ones that you just know not to click on. But yeah, some of the other ones where the intimidation, the threat of something if you don't take action, that you're going to lose something, and it's so ironic that what I actually lost was what they were threatening I would lose if I didn't take care of it, which is
They
my
were telegraphing, almost telegraphing to you what they were going to do, which is kind of
exactly,
distressing. Yeah.
exactly. So, but some of the other feelings, like we were talking about, is like the anger, and the anger that they're, I mean, I told a couple of people, and they're like, "Oh God, people are just really shitty, aren't they? They're just really awful people out there." And I would hate to ever become that jaded to make a comment like that. But at the same time, there are really unscrupulous people that just have zero conscience.
Hmm.
They, I had talking about violations. I had my domain name was a credit card because it had been compromised, so I cancelled it, and it was up. My domain name was up for renewal, so it didn't get. There was a day lapse when I was changing credit
Yeah.
cards, and there's a person out there who deliberately um, poaches websites that belong to either coaches or pediatricians or therapists or people like that. And the
Okay.
second they lapse, they turn it into a porno site because they
Oh,
know how damaging it is to your profession. And
right.
then they try and extort. Like for me, it was like they wanted, I think he wanted initially $20,000 for me to get my name back. And then and then in the end, he negotiated down to 10,000. He would take it for 10. And I
Hmm.
looked him up because his name. I mean, he's not hiding. He's not a hacker. He's out. He does this all the time. I contacted my whoever was, I think it was GoDaddy or whoever it was, and I said, "How can this happen?" They said, "Oh, he makes a living out of this. He does it all the time." And I'm like, "You know him, and you know he deliberately targets doctors and professionals and coaches and therapists." And they're like, "Yep, there's nothing we can do about it. You let it lapse, and that's what happens." But
Wow.
anyway, long story short, I looked him up, and there was a lot of stuff about him on the internet. But there was a couple of people that said that they had taken him to court and they had won. So I actually thought, oh my goodness, okay. So I contacted him and I said, listen, your name is out there on the internet. People know what you do. You've lost some cases. I know it would cost me probably about $1,000 to hire a lawyer to take care of this. I said, so I'm going to cut to the chase here. There's $1,000, I hope you can live with yourself because I think you're scum. But if you take the $1,000, I'll take my name back. Thank you very much. And he did.
Okay.
But still, but again, it's like, how can people do that?
It is something that, unfortunately, we live in a world where people's level of integrity is variable.
It's true.
And much as we talk about relationships, about having people with high integrity and high regard for each other and respect for ourselves and each other, there are a lot of people out there don't do that, don't have that level. And whether it's from their own wounding, because that's a lot of times what it is, that they didn't actually, what I'm looking for, learn how to live a life of more quality and integrity and trust. So they're basically doing the best they can with what they know how. That's one thing to remember from our teachers talking about this, about, even with people that you judge, you look through the lens of knowing they do the best they can do with what they know how to do, which may not be very high. So a lot of times our work is to, in a way, have compassion for them, as much as it sucks to be able to do that with somebody who's trying to get money from you. But in terms of having a sense, and this is part of the spiritual work in a way of having, how to say this, the curriculum, the journey, the process we're going through, being able to hold a high watch. At the same time, this is the thing I want to talk about. It's funny, I had this thought last night about turning the other cheek. There's so much Jesus talks about turning the other cheeks in the Bible summary. I'm not a Bible scholar, but it talks about the idea. But my thing is, yes, you turn the other cheek, but you deal with it too. You got to be accountable and responsible to what happens. You don't just go, it's fine, it won't ever get up again. You trust it. It's like you got to have some sort of boundary and a level of ownership of fixing the situations so it doesn't happen again. Like the thing is, like example, the break-in in my place, the thing I did right away was change the locks and make sure the doors had security on them, because I couldn't fix what already happened, but I can do my best to stop it happening again.
Yeah. Yeah. And you just said something there. I just want to jump on this because when you were saying that everybody's doing the best they can and it was some type of wounding and things like that, which brings up the nature versus nurture argument.
Oh, okay.
I think we will do a whole big show on that one. But
Yeah.
but there are people that, and again, especially in the work that I do with, codependency and narcissistic abuse, there can be some outrageous behavior. And this whole sort of like, oh, well, something happened to them and they're doing the best they can. And they really, and I get it. That's wonderful to be compassionate and to be understanding and all of that stuff. But at the same time, some people are just, that they are psychopaths or sociopaths or
Yep.
have a narcissistic personality disorder. They really don't have a conscience. So
Right.
it's not, that their own wounding. It's just how they came into this world. And that's where we have to, yes, on a spiritual level, we know that they're just functioning from the place where they're at. And yes, they were born into this world without a conscience. So in essence, they really are doing the best they can because they don't have a conscience. But that doesn't mean that you stay with them and try and fix them or forgive really outrageous bad behavior because you've got that part of you that's saying to you, well, poor them, they've been through this, they've been through that. It's like, it's the tiger versus the kitten. When it's a tiger, you just don't go in the cage with them and try and play with it like it's a fluffy little kitten. No, it's a tiger and it's going to rip your head off, your arm off, or whatever. So just know your animal you're with. And that's the difference between being in a relationship with somebody that does behavior that is a violation of your boundaries and things like that. And when it's a stranger, it's like you don't know if it's a kitten or a tiger. You don't know.
Right.
And that's where that helplessness comes in, that feeling of mistrust of anyone. I mean, when I was working with the person that was trying to help me, he was like, oh, well, let me get in here on your computer. And I was like, oh, you don't understand how hard this is. It's like you're basically saying, open yourself up to me again so I can get in there. It's like, can I really trust you, even though you come highly recommended? So it was just, part of my body was like going, no, don't trust anybody. Just, move on.
I have been going through some stuff recently, technology-wise speaking, is getting, because I've been building up my relationship already in this quiz that I've been working on for the last 5 months. I had to have the developer have access to the back of my website to be able to fix some problems, because even though it's a plugin for my site, where it means that it's their product, because the way it's interacting with all the rest of my site, they need to see what's going on in the back end to fix things.
Yes.
And giving them access, even though I had to do it 3 times, like with different accounts, because I had to change their accounts, but give them administrator, like boss access to my site.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy. You definitely understand that feeling of like, because the thing is, my site is my, it's my identity on the web, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was such a, and because I've now got a web developer who's working on my site now as well, but he's worked on my friend's site, and I trust him because my friend's site was done beautifully, and they trust and everything else. But this developer I didn't know before, so the that sense of trepidation and going, do I trust them or not? Like you were saying, I so get that. And that's the thing about that violation sense, is that for those of us, especially I think those of us who have kindness and compassion in our lives and bring in our lives, may have more fear or concern about being trodden on. Like, I mean, coming from my background, I definitely come from a much, I was going to say meek is the wrong word, but I come from a much less like ego-driven life. So I have experienced in the past, in high school, being bullied by other boys. So I've been in a place where I've been, I experienced what it's like to not be in charge of everything. I'll say it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So when things happen that are out of my control, it's a familiar feeling. There's an association in there as well that comes through. So being in friendships or being with people who push that bullying button, that can be triggering. Even though I've worked through it and resolved everything else, there's a familiarity with that old experience in there.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes what can happen is that we can get the alarm bells going off when a circumstance where it may not necessarily be necessary, but the reflex is built in because we've experienced something dark before.
Yeah.
And this is true of other things too. But the thing we're talking about this, and I think what I want to bring back, you said earlier, is also in this work is learning how to have healthy and conscious boundaries, so that we do know where we say yes and no, where we don't let people cross those lines. Because they think about, once bitten, twice shy idea. Sometimes it's once bitten, once, then it's 3 times bitten, then it's 5 times bitten, sort of thing,
Yeah.
So
Something that just to sort of like also end this on a more positive note is
yes.
to just allow all of those emotions to happen. I mean, it was a roller coaster for me. It felt like it was compounded. There were other sort of losses going on or things happening, and in my life, so it just felt like the final straw. But it did. I honored the sort of depression that came with it a little bit, and I'm not normally a depressed person at all, but there was a sort of a dip in my enthusiasm for life level, which is sort of surprising to me. And there was this, as I say, this sort of shame came up about, oops, I got duped. And but what also comes up is when you allow all those emotions to just move through you, none of them are bad, like the depression or the anger or the feeling betrayed or shame or whatever, that fear of letting somebody else in again or whatever. All of those feelings are just so normal. And when we don't judge them and we just let them flow through us, you naturally just bounce back. You naturally just the resilience starts showing itself up. And that to me is a huge gift. When you give yourself that opportunity to see that, oh, none of these feelings are bad. They're not going to keep me down. They're a normal part of the grieving process, anger, sadness, fear, shame, whatever it is. And that we always bounce back up. We always bounce back up in the end. And the quicker we allow those feelings to move through us and not judge them and not grapple with them and just allow them to flow through us, the quicker they do move on. And you'll naturally just in a couple of weeks be like, oh God, what? Wow, I can't remember feeling why I felt so down last week. It's moved through me so fast. But
Right.
I mean, I have hope. I'd like to see if I can still get it back. But if I don't, I know that I can start over again. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. And maybe I actually learn a lesson and not be so dependent on social media for my outreach to thousands of people. It's definitely, there are other ways you can do it that are less vulnerable. I mean, I still have my email list and things like that. That's all fine. But the thousands that we do reach through social media,
Right.
those of us that use social media as a business, because as I say, contacting friends and family is easy. I just create a new Facebook page and, I've got those back in droves, but it's the people
Mm.
you don't know that find you that you have to sort of build back up.
Yeah, couple of quick things. One is for the talking about the people getting access to the back of my site, they did fix everything. It's all working perfectly. My site's now live. People can use it and everything. The quiz is live, rather. My site's still getting rebuilt. But it was and that's the thing, is that when you come out the other side, it is all clean. Because because as soon as they're done, which I haven't done yet, I need to go back and do this, is disable those accounts so they don't come back in again. But my site's now working, which is good. But the other part that I was going to say is, this is something I remember from USM. We talked about this, about reframing issues as blessings.
Yes.
Is how to see how to shift the onus from the problem into a solution, so we do become more solution oriented. Because that's the thing, is that, again, as I said earlier, when we start getting upset about what happened and we think we go back and fix what happened, we can no longer do that. It's already done. It's history. But then what can you do differently now, especially when it's like you were saying about how you put more energy into your own self-care and self-support and build your own trust back up again? What can you do to make a difference on that level? Because you can make a difference on that level.
Mm-hmm.
So the work becomes more self-reflective to start with, and then, yes, action steps, but from a whole place versus a wounded place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And again, like I said, even there is that little part of me that's like, what was the universe trying to tell me here? Besides being more careful, obviously, and not putting all your eggs in one basket as far as like sort of using social media to reach people, but also just, there is always a message. One door closes, another one opens. It's such an old cliche, but it's so true. And
Yeah.
I always feel that I've had incredible things happen to me in my life, whereas it's at the moment it's looked like, like divorce, for goodness sake, divorce looks like it's such an ending. But the, what opened up to me, the level of relationship that I'm in now compared to what I was in before. It's just incredible. To have that much love and respect and kindness and things like that when you don't realize that you're putting up with less than you deserve or desire in a relationship, and it might
Yeah.
end, you feel the loss initially, and but yeah, I remember doing an ideal scene, another USM tool we used, and I was writing it, and it was all about my future and growing old in my marriage and my grandchildren and our family together. And I remember when my marriage failed, I remember being pissed off. And I was like, sod those ideal scenes. They don't work. But what I was forgetting was, across the top, we write this or something better. But for
For the highest good.
the highest good of all concerned. And at the time, it's like I was in charge of my life. I thought I knew what was better for me and what I wanted, but the universe knew, or God, or spirit, whatever you want to call it, they knew there was something bigger and better for me. And they knew.
This I remember those ideal scenes and that statement across the top, because it always struck me as being, damn, it means I'm not in charge.
Yeah.
Because it's like the joke about saying, if you want to make God laugh, make plans.
Yeah, exactly.
It was the idea about, we build this vision and the idea of what we want to create, the ideal scene. But the fact there's that quote across, that statement across the top, the declaration, the ownership saying, this is something better for the highest good of all concerned, meaning that what I'm planning for isn't necessarily what's going to happen.
Exactly.
And that's okay. And make it okay. That's the biggest piece, is like being okay with the change. And I think it's probably philosophy for life, is that you aim for what you want, but being okay with what shows up. Because you did your best. That's what the goal is. And then things can then be what they are. Oftentimes better than you planned, if you're willing to allow that to happen. So, yeah, useful
I think
tool.
this is a fabulous segue into next week's topic. I think we should do ideal scenes and the purpose behind them. And, most of our listeners we always say, it's a relationship show, but it's fundamentally the relationship we have with ourselves and then with everybody else in the world.
Yes.
So I think I'd love to do one on ideal scenes. Let's just share the process with our listeners and how it's done and what they would like in their relationships, the ideal vision for their relationships. So I think we're going to do that next.
There we go.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us for another week, and we will see you all next week. Bye, Barry. Thank you.
Right, take care, everybody. We trust you enjoyed this episode. and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well, so go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.